Started from the bottom, now my search on the wall. Late nights,
What's
cold
up,
tight,
everybody?
never
Today
dropped
we're
in
going to be
the
discussing the
ball.
first core domain of the CompTIA Security Plus exam, General Security Concepts. General Security Concepts is the bedrock for everything else, the fundamentals, principles, and ideas that all other security topics rest upon. General Security Concepts covers 12% of the exam, and what it entails is an overview of the fundamentals of cybersecurity. Just like you need to understand basic anatomy before performing surgery, you need to grasp the basic security concepts before diving into any advanced topics. So here we go. In this chapter, we'll cover a broad array of foundational ideas, from security controls and their categories to core security principles like the CIA triad, concepts like AAA and non-repudiation, the importance of physical security, and even how organizations manage changes securely through the change management processes. We'll also see how these basics play out in real scenarios. So let's break this down step by step. We're going to start with security controls and their categories. So let's first start by understanding what a security control is. The term security controls is going to appear over and over throughout our discussions. So to define a security control, simply put, it's any measure taken to reduce security risk or to protect assets. Controls can be technical solutions, policies, procedures, or even physical barriers. However, not all controls are alike. We classify controls to better understand their purpose and how each control fits into an overall security strategy. There are four main categories of security controls that you should be aware of. The first, technical controls, aka logical controls. Now, technical controls are safeguards implemented through technology. For instance, if you configure something on a computer or a network device to enhance security, that's a technical control. So remember, firewalls, encryption, anti-malware software, intrusion detection systems, and so on. Technical controls enforce security in the digital spaces. You can think of them as the gadgets and software that protect systems. Next, we have administrative controls, or aka managerial controls. Now, these controls are more about policies, procedures, and processes. They come from management and define how security is to be managed. So when you think of administrative controls, think security policies, like an acceptable use policy for company computers, security training and awareness programs for staff, incident response plans, and standard operating procedures. Administrative controls set the rules of the game and ensure that everyone knows their security responsibilities. Next up, operational controls, or aka procedural controls, sometimes considered a subset of administrative controls. Now, within this smaller umbrella of administrative controls, operational controls are the day-to-day activities and procedures that support security. This includes backup routines, change management processes, user access reviews, and incident response drills. So think of it like this. Operational controls ensure that security isn't just defined on paper, but is carried out in practice regularly. Here's a way to visualize the difference between the two. If administrative controls say, we should do X, operational controls say, here's how we do X. Next, physical controls. Now, these are tangible measures to protect physical assets and locations. Think locks, fences, security guards, access systems, and even environmental controls like fire suppression and humidity and temperature controls in server rooms. Now, physical controls protect the building, servers, and other hardware from tampering, people that want to steal, or even natural disasters. Physical controls remind us that cybersecurity isn't just virtual. If someone can walk into your data center and pull out a drive, that's a security failure. Now, in a robust security program, we use a combination of these control categories. For example, consider a secure data center. Technical controls might encrypt the data on the servers and enforce login authentication. Administrative controls would include background checks for employees and a policy that two people must be present in order to access the server room. Operational controls would include regular review of access logs and testing of backup systems. And physical controls would be the locks, biometric scanners, and CCTV cameras guarding the room. Together, they create layered security, or what we call in the cybersecurity world, defense in depth. Now, when this question comes up on your CompTIA Security Plus exam, remember, defense in depth is multiple layers of defense so that if one fails, others still protect the asset. Now, in addition to categories, in cybersecurity, we also classify controls by their function or their purpose. And this is defined by what those controls actually do to mitigate risk. So there's a few classifications. First, preventative controls. And as the name suggests, these aim to prevent security incidents from occurring in the first place. They're your first line of defense. So think strong authentication requirements, which prevent unauthorized access, firewalls preventing malicious traffic, encryption preventing data from being read by those that don't have a need to know, and security awareness training, which prevents human mistakes like falling for a phishing attack, and allowing an unauthorized individual to tailgate you after you've badged in with your PIV card and utilize your access code. Now, I know I just dropped a few terms here that you may or may not be familiar with, but as we continue with this course, we're going to define each of these terms in great detail. Now, these three controls that I mentioned are preventative controls, and if they're working perfectly, these controls can stop an attack or error before any damage is done. Hence, preventative security. The next classification on the agenda is detective controls. Now, let's assume something may have slipped past those preventative controls that we mentioned, which can happen from time to time. Detective controls will identify and alert the proper security personnel, ideally in time to act. Examples of a detective control would include an intrusion detection system, and as the name signifies, an intrusion detection system detects and alerts when suspicious traffic has been identified. Now, I want you to take a moment and think of anything else that can be classified as a detective control. Did you think of anything? Perfect. So what may have come to mind are security cameras, motion sensors, anti-tampering devices. None of these technologies actually stop an intruder, but what they do is alert security personnel and record evidence that, hey, something strange has happened here. This is why it's crucial that system audit logs are configured properly to record unusual behavior. Detective controls answer the question, how do we know something bad or suspicious is happening? Well, because the alarm went off. And then we can go back to the security cameras or the audit logs and see whether it was an actual intruder or a non-adversarial employee's mistake. Now, the next classification that you need to remember are corrective controls. Now, these come into play after an actual incident has occurred. And the reason for corrective controls is to limit damage and restore systems. Corrective controls are the cleanup and recovery measures in place to respond to an incident. Have you ever gotten an alert from your antivirus software on your computer that a file has been quarantined or that malware had been removed? This only happens after it was detected. In this way, anti-malware software acts as both a preventative control and a corrective control. And on a larger scale, a disaster recovery plan is put in place to restore data from a backup after a server crash, or applying an emergency patch to fix a newly discovered vulnerability. Corrective controls attempt to fix or mitigate the problem post-incident. Now, the next classification of controls are deterrent controls, and these are meant to discourage attackers or malicious insiders from even attempting an action by making it clear that there will be consequences. So take a moment to think, as a cybersecurity professional, if you were implementing deterrent controls, what type of controls would you put in place? If you've ever been to a 7-Eleven or a shopping mall, usually you'll see a posted warning sign saying this area is under 24-hour CCTV surveillance. Now, that sign would be considered a deterrent control. It doesn't physically stop someone, but it might discourage you. So on federal government systems, before you can log in or authenticate to a system, you're going to be met with a warning banner about prosecution for unauthorized access. Now, that warning banner isn't necessarily going to stop a malicious attacker from accessing a federal government system without gaining authorization, but the presence of that warning banner may make them think twice. Another example that more than likely you've experienced when walking into a department store is a loss prevention or a security guard standing at the front of the door. Think about Walmart or Sam's Club checking your receipt. It's not necessarily going to stop someone from shoplifting if they really want to that bad, but the idea of getting caught is probably going to come with some consequences. Now, the next classification we have are compensating controls. Now, these are alternative controls that are used when the primary or recommended control isn't necessarily feasible. So with a compensating control, you compensate by strengthening other areas. For example, if a small company can't afford a state-of-the-art biometric access system, they may compensate with other measures like extra locks, cameras, and strict key management, which isn't exactly the same as having the biometric scanners, but you're achieving an equivalent level of security by other means. In essence, compensating controls fill the gap when ideal controls can't be implemented. And this ensures that the risk is still addressed adequately. Now, it's crucial and extremely important to remember and understand the difference between the categories that we've discussed in the classifications that we've discussed. You'll need to know the difference on your Security Plus exam, and you'll also need to know the difference in the field as a cybersecurity professional. Here's an example of a question you might get on the exam. The Acme Corporation security team reviews security logs daily. What type of control is this? The answer to this question is that 1, it's an operational control because it's an operation conducted daily, and 2, it's a detective control because reviewing logs is a way to detect incidents. Or another question may ask, after a breach, Acme Corporation updated its incident response plan and applied patches to systems that were breached. Now, these measures taken by the Acme Corporation will be considered corrective controls. Now, let's bring these theories to life and put these controls in action. Imagine a healthcare organization that needs to protect patient data. As a preventative, technical control, the hospital can implement encryption on their database and require multi-factor authentication for access. Now, for their detective controls, they should implement something like an intrusion detection system and a SIM, which is a security information and event management system. Also, it'll be a good idea for the hospital to conduct regular audits to review who's accessed patient records. Next, the hospital should implement some corrective controls. So in order to do that, they'll need to maintain nightly backups and an incident response team that can isolate infected systems if malware is detected. Let's apply some deterrent controls. Let's display warning banners on organization-owned systems that unauthorized access will lead to termination and prosecution. And it'll probably be a good idea to have security guards in the lobby and maybe somewhere near the server room. And last but not least, compensating controls. So perhaps this hospital can't afford biometric door locks. So instead, they can use combination locks plus camera surveillance as a compensation. Now, by putting all these controls in place, this is a multi-layered approach, defense in depth. The key lesson is that no single control is foolproof, but by combining them, we create a robust defense. Let's summarize what we've gone over today. So in summary, security controls are the tools in our toolbox to protect assets, and they come in different flavors. You have technical controls, administrative controls, operational controls, physical controls, and all of the different controls have a different purpose, like preventative controls, detective controls, corrective controls, or compensating controls. Now, as a good cybersecurity practitioner, you should know how to mix and match these controls to reduce risk effectively.
Started from the bottom, now my search on the wall. Late nights, cold tight, never dropping the ball.